What's your best "I didn't just dodge a bullet, but a tactical nuke" story? Story 1. I was driving with my wife in town one snowy evening, and we had pulled up to a stoplight. I happened to glance up at the rearview mirror and saw a city bus heading towards us and rotating sideways. I hit the gas and pulled ahead into the intersection and left into the turning lane, and less than a second later, the bus went sliding through right where our car was. It came to a stop on the other side of the intersection and fortunately didn't hit anything, but 1 second or 2 feet difference and we would have had some nice spinal injuries. Story 2. Hubs, my sister and I were hanging out around my parents' house on a very boring 4th of July. We decided to wash my husband's new car sitting in the driveway because it was hot out and an excuse to play in the house. We were literally walking out the front door and I said, we should eat lunch before we get all wet and stuff, and everyone agreed. So we turned around and went back inside. I was warming up something in the microwave, a Hot Pocket I think, and all of a sudden I hear the loudest bang I think I've ever heard from the direction of the front door. Hubs and I look at each other wide-eyed and run outside. I was greeted by the back end of a Crown Vic smoking something fierce, plowed into the tree in the middle of our yard. For a split second, I was just stunned, then screamed to my sister inside to call 911. I looked over to the driveway at the car we had been planning to wash just 5 minutes ago and was completely destroyed. And I mean completely destroyed. Guy hit it so hard it did a complete 90-degree turn across the driveway. He actually hit it so hard it ended up ricocheting and hitting the other cars in the driveway, mauling 2 other cars. Yard was Crown Vic was and a tree was We immediately assumed it was drunk driving, being the 4th of July and all. I went over to the driver's side and found a very old man, very bewildered, unable to comprehend what I was saying, but conscious. I will never forget the look that he gave me, confused, helpless, and scared. I was on the line with the paramedics as they sent over the ambulances, and tried my best to follow their instructions. My sister was only 14 at the time, so I handled the call. Turns out the dude was diabetic and had passed out behind the wheel due to low blood sugar, hit the gas pedal with his weight as he passed out, and was plowing down a residential street at about 65 miles per hour. He jumped the curb, drove down the sidewalk, past another house, then slammed into my husband's car, and subsequently the tree. If we had been anywhere near that yard/driveway, I have no doubt one or all of us would have been seriously injured or dead. It was sheer dumb luck and timing that saved us. Huge bullet dodged, or should I say, a huge car dodged. Jesus, that's an insanely close call. You've got to thank your gut instinct and that last-minute decision to eat lunch for saving your lives. It's honestly terrifying to think about how a single, seemingly insignificant decision can make the difference between life and death. As for the old man, it's a relief to know that he wasn't drunk driving, but it's crucial for people with medical conditions like diabetes to be extremely cautious when operating a vehicle. Honestly, I think there should be stricter regulations for medically vulnerable drivers to ensure they don't pose a threat to themselves and others on the road. Story 3. I had a cardiac arrest about 4 years ago. Dropped dead-ish in the middle of my shift. Found out after I woke up about a week later that A, the manager who saw me fall was a former lifeguard and knew proper CPR. B, an ambulance happened to be passing about 2 blocks away. C, probably the best cardio unit in my state was a 10-minute ambulance ride from where it all happened. Walked out of the hospital about 2 weeks later, full recovery. Reply 1. Just before starting high school, I got hit by a car going 35 miles per hour while riding my bike. T-boned my bike, went under the car. I was thrown up, smashed the windshield out with my back, was flipped over the car and landed a perfect no-hop landing on my feet like a gymnast, minus the arms raised flourish at the end. The entire accident was witnessed by a firefighter who was watching out his window, literally standing right next to his emergency radio, and called for an ambulance. The lady who hit me got out of the car yelling, I'm a nurse, lie down." I had no breaks or fractures, just a bruised rib cage. Story 4. A friend had lost his job under suspicious circumstances. A few weeks later, he asked me to take him to the bank. As I got near to pick him up, I caught a train. He called to say never mind, he would get someone else. A few days later, a friend sent out a message to a large number of our friends. This guy lost his job and was running a check cashing con. Can you cash this check for me? I'll pay you $50 if you do. The check is $500. He has no backing funds. You eat the whole amount. He did this to several friends in a few days to amass a few grand and was about to skip town when the cops got him. Halfway through this, I was thinking, you dodged being an unknown getaway driver for a bank robbery. Story 5. When my great aunt passed away, I was helping to clean out her house. I'm just dragging everything out of the basement, and suddenly my dad is like, "Whoa, put that down gently and let's move away from here." So I put the weird metal tube type thing I'm carrying down and get out of there. Turns out it's a mortar shell from when my aunt worked in a munitions factory during World War II. Squad came and took it away. Story 6. There was a pile of stuff that people would leave at our house when I was at university, coats and stuff. Moving out day, and we found a random samurai sword in the pile. We were messing about with it, trying to make it go swoosh. I was standing facing my brother while he was swooshing it when the blade dislodged from the handle, flew straight past me, and stuck horizontally into my headboard. So, yeah, my brother nearly impaled me while messing around with a random sword we found after a house party. This story is a perfect reminder that you should always handle unfamiliar or potentially dangerous objects with extreme caution, especially if you're not trained or experienced with them. It's incredible how a fun, lighthearted moment could have taken such a dark turn in an instant. I'm so relieved that the blade missed you and nobody got hurt, but please take this as a valuable lesson for the future. If you ever come across random objects like that, it's best to either leave them be or ensure they're handled safely and properly. Story 7. Not my story, but a girl I knew had had a few drinks and decided to hitchhike home, a town about 40 minutes away from the one she'd been drinking at. Note, it is very common for people to hitchhike in this area. She gets picked up by a car of guys. All seems fine until she points out they can drop her off just up ahead, and they keep driving. She had that instant sober feeling. She plays it off like she's clueless and totally down to keep hanging out with them, acting like she's very drunk. Meanwhile, they're back in a more forested area of the highway. Then she fakes dry heaves and says she is about to puke, really putting on a show so they stop to let her out. She books it into the bushes and just doesn't look back until she's safe. Reply 1. When I was in high school, we had a cop come talk to us about what to do if we were in the car with someone and things didn't feel right. They said to use the 3 Ps and say you desperately gotta puke, gotta pee, or gotta poop, and the more often than not cares more about their car getting soiled than whatever they wanted to do with you, and will let you out. Story 8. I had some chest pains one night and woke up my wife to tell her. She got a little scared that it might be a heart attack, and we agreed that I should go to the ER. The nurses were pretty sure it was a false alarm, but would run an EKG as in common practice. In my head, I was hoping that the chest pain would come back, not to prove a heart attack, but so that we can find out what the chest pain really was. The EKG was done by one veteran nurse and a new nurse. I was watching over their shoulders. Something was flashing on the screen that made both nurses look at each other with disbelief. They ran it again, and one nurse went out of the station for help. The others stayed with me and very nicely told my wife and daughter to go back out to the waiting room. A few seconds later, 5 to 6 more people came into the room slowly and calmly and began preparing me for something. It turns out I was having my second heart attack that night in the ER. The doctors and nurses found an obstruction in my heart and were preparing me to have it cleared and a stent placed. When I got out of surgery, the doctor who placed the stent told me, "You probably picked the best time and place to have a heart attack. Right here in the ER. Dude, that's like hitting the health lottery right there. Your story is like an action movie where everything comes together at the perfect moment. You wake up with chest pains, then you've got the experienced nurse tech team performing an EKG, and boom, heart attack number 2 happens right in front of them. Talk about timing. It's wild to think that if you hadn't been in the ER at that exact moment, things could have gone so differently. The universe was really looking out for you that night. Story 9. A few years ago, I was in a small fender bender. Someone merged into my lane with me in it and smashed my driver's side door and their passenger door together. I had pulled my arm in from having it hanging out the window about 15 seconds before that happened. Would have most likely had my arm ripped off. Reply 1. This exact thing happened to a friend of mine, except his car flipped and his arm got crushed and ripped the skin and most of the muscle from his forearm. He played football, soccer in the academy for a very well-known European team. It ended his career in an instant. The academy coach and first-team manager were a witness for him in court and showed documents stating he was going to be offered a first-team contract. He made a fair chunk in compensation, but nothing compared to what he would have got playing in the top leagues of Europe. Story 10. I used to work for a drainage company. I drove 5-ton trucks with the roll-off bins. Used to move machines or material with them. One day, I was super tired. I pulled up to a job, tilted the bed up, got out, opened the dump gates. Get back in the cab, roll forward slowly. Nice dump. Great. Get out of the cab, go back and close dump chutes. Oh crap, still a bunch of sand in there. Dumbass me unlatched the gate of the roll-off bin. About half a yard of sand was still in there, and the bin was still on an angle. That door opened so fast. The latch got catapulted into my cheek so hard, I broke my orbital and knocked me to the ground. Blacked out briefly. The gate itself swung out, somehow missed me, and just had clearance over my steel toe boot. Dented the steel, scraped all the fabric off the boot. I ended up with just a small scar under my right eye. But I could have easily lost my toes and an eye if I'd been standing about 1 inch to the left. Do not operate heavy equipment while tired or drunk. Story 11. A few years ago, I had pneumonia, but my whole family insisted that it was just post-nasal drip, which runs in the family. After a week or two, I woke up in the middle of the night when I couldn't feel my arm. After I got to the ER, the doctor said that it was the worst he'd ever seen, and he was surprised I wasn't dead. I had 3 pounds of mucus cut out of my lungs, and another 2 weeks in the hospital slowly recovering. For 3 months afterwards, I could barely walk half a mile without starting to pass out, and I still can't run for more than 200 or 300 yards without collapsing. Story 12. I was driving home from visiting my brother in Vermont when a snowstorm started. I didn't have much experience driving in serious snow, and I completely lost control. Car careened off the road and I was heading for a giant boulder at around 50 or 60 miles per hour. I felt time slow down and I reflected on my life for a moment and then said goodbye to my body. Suddenly, I was jolted out of it by an abrupt impact, but I could see that the boulder was still 20 or 30 feet away. When I got out of the car, I saw that I had hit a little skinny tree that I could have easily grabbed with one hand. However, it had a giant root system that lifted the car off the ground and stopped me. Car was totaled, but I was completely fine because of that little tree. There is no way I would have survived the other impact. That tree was like a guardian angel in disguise, proving that sometimes the smallest things can make the biggest impact. Mother Nature sure knows how to throw curveballs, but that day, she was definitely on your side. Story 13. Yesterday, I was helping my fiance's dad cut some tree limbs from his yard. He was on a lift trying to cut some limbs that were dangling dangerously high over a steel propane tank. The tank itself had $1,500 worth of propane. He cut off a limb and it hit the tank with the largest bang I've ever heard. Propane came pouring out the top like smoke from a mortar. He struggled to get the lift down enough to jump out and run for his life. He would later find out that the limb hit the gas valve and it fell straight down into the tank. If it had sparked once, it wouldn't have mattered how far we ran. We would be dead. Him, me, and my fiance, who was showering inside unaware. Now he has no gas, is out $1,500, and almost died. Big twist is that I saw him smoking up there. There's no way we should be alive, let alone could. The gas is still leaking out even after 24 hours. Story 14. My family and I were about to leave a store, and then my mom had to pee, so we all waited for her. On the highway right in front of us, there was a nasty fatal crash that left multiple dead people. Reply 1. I had this exact thing as well. It was the end of the day and I was leaving work. I had a really bad feeling, like something horrible could happen to me if I drove home. It took me about 5 minutes to convince myself to go home. On the way home, I came upon a nasty collision at the intersection near my house. Police hadn't been called yet, and I could see the driver of one car getting dazed in the driver's seat with a bloody brow. It really could have been me. Story 15. Back in the 80s, a friend asked me to go on a motorcycle trip to Alaska with him. I declined. He had an accident on the way, skidded several hundred yards on his head, and now has a metal plate. I would have been on that bike with him. Reply 1. As someone who lives in Alaska and has taken a handful of motorcycle trips, in my opinion, there isn't a more beautiful or dangerous way to experience the views that the state has to offer. Even driving through town, there are huge patches of the road constantly covered in gravel or potholes. I will never own or probably ride another bicycle as long as I live here. I have just seen way too many accidents, and my dad has told several stories about the people he's seen lose their lives on the road. Beautiful, fun, but so dangerous. Man, talk about a life-changing decision. By skipping that Alaska motorcycle trip, you avoided a potentially disastrous situation. It's moments like these that make you realize how one choice can alter the entire course of your life. It's important to weigh the pros and cons before embarking on such adventures, and your story is a prime example of why it's crucial to listen to your gut. So, while the thrill of the open road might be tempting, It's always good to err on the side of caution. Stay safe and make wise choices, my friend. Story 16. There was a bad windstorm in 2008 in Cincinnati, Ohio that came from a hurricane. Cincinnati is actually in the Ohio Valley, which means it doesn't typically get that windy. It was my future father-in-law's birthday, and we were trying to make it over to their house for lunch, only 5 minutes away. The main road is blocked by police cars as trees and power lines have fallen. No worries. I'll take the back way. I went a little further and had to turn around because another tree had fallen and blocked both sides of the road. I turn around and go another direction. I get to the end of the street and can go either left or right. The left is blocked by a cop car and another car just turned around, so I'm going to go right. It's a three-way stop and I stopped first. I started to go and the car on my left who just turned around wasn't stopping and ran the stop sign. I was frustrated but heard a creaking sound. A 25-plus tree fell with the trunk perpendicular to where me and my now wife were sitting, covering all windows with branches. We crawl out of the car and notice the tree itself is only being held by the stretched out power lines. If those power lines wouldn't have held the tree, we would have been crushed without a doubt. We just celebrated our 9th wedding anniversary and have 4 beautiful children, but it all could have ended that day. Story 17. I got divorced after nearly 18 years of marriage. Under our state alimony laws, I would have needed to pay her 30% of my before-tax income for nearly 15 years. There's an exception, however. If she remarries or lives with a partner, then she gets no alimony. While the divorce proceedings were going on, I learned that my ex, A, was living with a partner, B, posting about it on Facebook, and C, had not made her Facebook private. Thank God, because that enabled me to very quickly and easily prove that my divorce should involve no alimony. Please leave your story down below in the comments. I would absolutely love to make a video about them in the future, and also don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time, Tony's fam, peace out.